What's going on, musical geniuses? Happy New Year. I think this is the first one you'll be seeing in the new year. And this is the last one before we will be doing our next discussion. So after you turn this one in, chill for a week, you'll come in and we will do another discussion round. You can bring whatever questions, comments you want. Some sections were on fire. Some sections, there was less participation. Maybe I'll bring you some more questions and see if we can have some good debate. I like to make it more about what you want to ask about, what you want to talk about. And sometimes that's perfect because all of these lectures are what I'm thinking is important. And I'd rather hear in the discussions what you think is important. In your writing, I should remind you that you don't need to cover every single bit of this. You just need to take the points that you think are cool and hit those. Okay. So without further ado, we'll get into ethics part 3. Previously, we looked into the Republic, and Socrates gets hit with this big question. Is it better to fake being good and have a good reputation, or to actually be good? And the question that he gets hit with is so powerful because a reputation is a lot. A reputation is really amazing. I'm recording this right now one day after the United States has basically taken out the leader of Venezuela. And I think that Donald Trump is ruining the reputation of the United States. Does that matter? I would say yes, it does matter. When Thailand and Cambodia are in the process of this border dispute, I mean, I don't know if it's a war, but it's like a border dispute. Thailand is trying to maintain their reputation. They don't just go crazy and start firing weapons into Cambodia, trying to randomly hit Cambodians because they're concerned. I mean, maybe it's because they're actually good inside, but part of it, of course, is maintaining the reputation of the country. Can a country have a reputation? Does that reputation matter? In the past, the reputation of a country had to be, if you mess with us, we're absolutely going to respond with horrible, lethal force. That was a good reputation. We talked about Machiavellianism last time, and this is the idea that, yeah, it's great to be loved, but it's even better to be feared. Thailand has an interesting foreign policy, 1 million friends and no enemies, but not quite no enemies today. Okay, lots to write about, lots to talk about, but the Ethics 1 and Ethics 2 were very much personal ethics. The question of how is it that you live your life? Because I roll us into politics. Yeah, it's interesting to talk about politics, but that doesn't really give you a lot of a bearing on how to live your life. And with you guys being musicians, going out into a world where you're going to be making your own decisions, you're 1 year away from maybe never having anybody tell you what to do for the whole rest of your life. You got to figure out how to make all these little decisions. What country am I going to live in? Who decides that, right? These are the questions of your life. These are ethical questions too. But today we're going to get so big that we will finally start to talk about systems. And I will start us off here in personal ethics. I'll move us up to touch on 2 major systems: utilitarianism that we talked about last week. We'll kind of finish that up. Libertarianism, it's focused on freedom of the individual. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about religion, and we will see where we go next. Beyond this, we have our discussions, and then we'll have 3 more lectures. After that, you have your final presentations. Your final presentations are going to be on whatever topic you think is interesting. It could be about ethics. It could be about politics. It could be about stuff that's particular to musicians. Is it ethically right to use fake vocals and lip sync? Is that an ethical problem, right? These are philosophical questions. Anything about how to live your life is fair game. I will, of course, give you 1,000 possible topics. I would like you to pick one that you like the best. If you don't like any of my topics and you want to make your own topic, that's the best idea there. So just be mindful of the fact that that is coming up. Next week, discussions. 3 weeks more of lecture and discussion, typing discussion and quizzes. And then we're going to do 3 weeks of final presentation, and that's the end of the course. We're almost done. Sad, but I'm happy because I get to hear what you guys think. So let's talk about systems, ethical systems. When I normally teach ethics, I will just teach ethical systems a lot of the time because that's the way these ethics books work. You talk about systems, right? I kind of wanted to throw that out and focus on eudaimonia, the question of the good life. How do you live a good life? And is being good actually good for your soul, or is it just good for your reputation? So when is it best to think through systems? I think I already mentioned it, and it's when you're a government. When you are making decisions that are going to affect millions of people, or maybe hundreds of millions of people, or maybe every single person on the planet. You might argue that every ethical decision is going to affect every person on the planet because we're all connected in some way. But when you get to the level of a government, these systems start to make a little bit more sense. And so we'll look into two of them today. In a later lesson, we might look at communism, and we might look a little bit more at nihilism. We'll see. I'd like to read what you write first and see how well it's going. All right. So systems. Last time we talked about utilitarianism, and utilitarianism is the greatest good for the greatest number of people. That means I can't make everybody happy, but I can make most people happy. And that's why we're going to listen to Taylor Swift and Shawn Mendes. It's because most people think that that is the best music, and very few people dislike it. So this is utilitarianism in music. Utilitarianism in politics is something that you can see pretty often. This is my man Bernie Sanders. I like him. He's an American politician. He's too old to be president, even though our last two presidents are 5,000 years old. This dude is also 5,000 years old. He was very interesting almost 10 years ago now because he was running for president trying to take zero money from banks, which was insane because nobody's ever won doing that, and he almost won. All right, let's go. There's a question of whether or not you can buy happiness. Sanders is often called a socialist, and a socialist would be somebody who says, let's give people more than just their freedom. Let's also give them health care. Let's also give them education. Let's give them access to programs that are going to make it okay for them to live. And somebody like Bernie Sanders, these socialists, they believe that something like being a teacher or being a musician, you go into these things, you know that you're not going to become rich. You know that there's 0% chance that you're going to become rich almost, you know? If you're a musician, you might. Taylor Swift got rich. Jay-Z got rich, you know? But they don't necessarily get rich by being the best at music. They get rich because they're the best at capitalism. That's just straight up true, right? Jay-Z is not the best rapper, but he was the first billionaire rapper. He's not that good of a rapper. He's just not, right? Taylor Swift is not that good of a singer. She writes songs that sound like commercials. She's the best at capitalism. Socialists try to say, hey, you want to go and help people? We're going to build a society where we're going to tax these business people who go out there and make a lot of plastic stuff flow between all of the nations easily, or whatever it is that business people do. We're going to tax them so that we can have people who want to help others, because helping others doesn't necessarily make you any money. Or you want to become, a painter or something. That's possible. You don't have to be the son of a business person to be a painter. You can actually be a painter, right? This is one of the things that socialism claims to open up. In capitalism, it's like anybody can be rich, and also anybody can be poor. But in socialism, supposedly, anybody can be rich, but nobody can be poor. They try to raise the floor up so that we have less poor people. So then there's the question of, can you buy happiness? And utilitarianism, as we saw before, is asking the question of how to make the most people happy. Now, the relationship between happiness and income is one that I like to always talk about with students. And I will usually say, okay, imagine that your kakanom is 20,000 baht per month. And that includes whatever you're going to pay for your rent, your food, your instrument upkeep, your practice space rental, your car, your transportation, whatever. You have 20,000 baht per month. That feels okay. You can survive, right? So you have this level of happiness. It's like, here. Now let's double that and say 40,000 baht per month. Ooh. wow, that's really much better. Because if you're in a hurry and you got to call a Grab, that's no problem. If you're hungry and you don't want to cook and you want to call Line Man to bring you food, you're getting a lot of things are a lot more convenient. You're probably not doing your own laundry anymore. You're able to buy yourself more time. And when you buy yourself more time, you have more happiness, right? Let's jump it up again to 80,000 baht per month. 80,000 baht per month. Oh yeah, boom. You're really feeling a lot more happiness, right? Because you're to the point where you're thinking every couple of weekends, let's go do something crazy. Like I got a bunch of money. I'm even saving some money. Like let's do something crazy. Let's go to an island. Let's just fly over here, right? Double it again and get to 160,000 baht per month. Oh man, every couple of months you're thinking, I want to go shopping in Japan. I want to get they got good headphones. I want to get some good headphones. I'm going to stay in a nice place, right? This happiness starts to really crank up. What about 100? I already said 160. What about 320,000? Double it again. At this point, you got a nice car. You got a nice apartment. All of your gear is nice. You're able to go into the studio every time you have an idea and have a team running around making that idea happen. Double it again, you get 640,000. How much better does it get at that point? How can you feel the difference between 320,000 baht per month and 640,000 baht per month? It's a huge difference in number. But how many things in your life are really going to be improved? You're going to be taking more expensive vacations. You might go from having a really good car that you never have to worry about to having a car that makes people look at you and be like, wow, this guy's rich, or this person is really fancy, right? You might be able to buy purses that are nice or something, but really how much more happiness do you have? Jump it up again and you're making more than $1 million a month. And when you're making more than $1 million a month, can you really feel the difference? You might say yes. But what about when you jump from 1 million to 2 million a month? What about from 2 million to 4 million a month? What about from 4 million to 8 million a month? Wow, this is a really high number. But you could probably feel the fact that at some point you have enough money where you don't notice more money. You know what I mean? And this starts to get into this idea of redistributive ethics and the idea that when you take things away from the ultra rich, you're kind of not taking that much happiness away from them. And when you give things to the poor, you are giving them something that completely changes their life. And this is one of the things that I was talking about with real friendships. If I was really, really, really friends with P. Win Motorsai, the problems that I have in my life and the problems that P. Win Motorsai has in his life are very different. Now, I'm a human rights person. I'm not trying to say I'm better than him in any way. But if I just cracked off 30,000 baht, if I just made 30,000 baht happen and I gave that to him, it would solve many of his problems, right? And it's only 30,000 baht. It's not like an insane amount of money. And I'm not rich. I'm definitely not rich, right? But when you have a friendship and you could solve that many of your friends' problems by just being like, I'm just going to put this in an envelope in your backpack and never tell you where it came from and insist that I never did it, How long could you stay friends knowing that you could solve so many of that person's problems by just being like, I'm just going to give you 0.00001% of the money that I can possibly earn. Do you know what I'm saying? If this is bothering you, you have your thing to write about, right? I don't feel like I'm saying something true. I'm saying something maybe to guanteño. This character right here is named Martin Scarelli. He bought a drug and he made it 1,000 times the cost. And he made a bunch of money off of it, and a bunch of people started dying. And he was called Pharma Bro, Martin Scarelli. Look him up. If we were to take some of his money and we were to give it to some of these people, we would not be taking away much of this gentleman's happiness, and we would be giving these kids lots of happiness. This is the utilitarian argument for redistribution. If you raise more people from the bottom, you create more happiness. Do you agree? Do you not agree? Write about it. And this is kind of the moral value here. When you're raising somebody out of suffering, that has a high level of moral value. But when you're giving somebody happiness, the moral value starts to go away. Ajahn Sugri, who built the College of Music, there's a lot of famous stories about the dude. And one of them was that he would go and argue with the rest of Mahidol University because the medical school has no problem getting money because they say, dude, we save people's lives. We help people who are sick be not sick anymore. We reduce their suffering. Your music gives people happiness, sure. It gives them meaning in their lives and everything. But we deserve more government funding because we are morally better. We raise people out of suffering. You think that's true? He fought them. He's like, what, do you want people to be sick? You want people to die or something? And these doctors are like, no. He was just an absolute tiger. I love the guy. So this is another interesting gentleman. His name is Andrew Yang. He also ran for president about 10 years ago, and he talked about a universal basic income called UBI. And they've tried this a few places. Sam Altman, who runs OpenAI, did a study on this, and he found that it didn't necessarily help, but I don't know whether I trust Sam Altman's research. So universal basic income basically says it's universal, so it's given to all citizens, it covers basic needs, and it's income paid every month. And this is something that's not like welfare. It would be given to everybody. So it just kind of like raises the floor to the poverty level. You take the poverty level, which is, let's say, 18,000 baht per month or something, and you tax crypto traders or something. Is it somebody who doesn't produce much for society, but who gets a lot of money? And you take money from these people who would otherwise, not even notice it because they're already so crazy rich. And you give 18,000 to every single person in Thailand, you would end poverty. Boom, right there, right? What are the arguments against this? Probably inflation. Probably that, okay, well, you raise the level and then that level, the poverty level would go up or something. But I think that there's a lot of reasons for this kind of thing, because if you could be dirt poor without having a job, you could spend 100% of your time eating, sleeping, and making music and like nothing else. And like being with your family, and you would be a musician that would be like funded by the state. You'd be a dirt poor, not dirt poor. You'd be like one little inch above dirt poor musician. Would that be a good thing? Up to you. Feel free to argue about that this week. We should be feeling lucky because we're actually quite lucky. We can sit in air-conditioned rooms and talk about big ideas, right? Now, John Rawls, this is an aside from utilitarianism. John Rawls talked about the veil of ignorance. And what he said was, we should be able to design any kind of society, but you don't get to know who you are in that society. You can make all the rules that you want, but you don't get to know who you are. So if you think that it's bad to tax the rich, maybe it's because you're rich, right? And if you think that we should not be creating equality for other people, it might be because you're already quite lucky. So if you imagine a world that doesn't have to take care of people who have difference of abilities, you don't know who you're going to be, and you don't know what your abilities are going to be, right? So this is the idea of the veil of ignorance. Let's set up the rules so that it's fair for anybody coming in to play the game. All right, this is a very interesting idea. John Rawls is another Harvard philosopher who's just very famous. One more thing for you to write about. Okay, so back to utilitarianism. It is the greatest good for the greatest number of people. It is the most good for the most people. Buddhism is actually kind of similar in this because it talks about the reduction of suffering, but it handles the reduction of suffering from a completely different angle. If you didn't write about this last week, this is maybe a good time to write about it this week. Utilitarianism in Bentham's world doesn't judge the kind of pleasure that people receive. If I take pleasure from watching Skibidi Toilet and you take pleasure from watching chamber music, there's no judgment of whether you have a higher pleasure or I have a higher pleasure. It's just People like what they like, no judgment. John Stuart Mill came around and switched this up and said, we need to recognize between higher pleasures and lower pleasures. And at this point, he's trying to instill virtue. And we see that our society tries to do that too. There are not grants for mumble rappers. There are grants for classical music. There are grants for jazz. There are grants for music in general, but not specifically for mumble rap, right? Okay. So in the Buddhist sense, the suffering inherent in life is recognized. And that's step one. And trying to not want all of these things, trying to refine the way that you receive pleasure is a big part of Buddhism. Okay, so utilitarianism wants to fight against suffering by increasing pleasure and reducing pain. It's a different situation. Now, in utilitarianism, it is all about math, right? So here's the trolley problem, and this is where a lot of ethics classes start. You have a runaway train coming. There are 5 people tied to the tracks here, and the runaway train is going to whack all of them. You're sitting there, and you can pull this lever. It's going to make the trolley go over to this other track, and it's going to whack only one person, and that would reduce the amount of suffering in the world. But you would have to make this act, and the act would be an act of violence, an act of murder. What do you think, right? This is a famous question. It's also a really good thing for final presentations. Students enjoy it quite a bit. We talked also about the philosophic calculus, where you have to determine all of the different elements of pleasure, but it's all a numbers game. It is all about calculation. And in this way, you can say that this is a consequentialist system. We care about the consequences. If you are a utilitarian, the fact that 5 people die versus the fact that 1 person dies is huge. The philosopher Michael Sandel gives us many different versions of this. One of them, there is a healthy patient sitting in the other room, and there are 5 people about to die because they need organ transplants. And Sandel says, if you're a doctor, you just run in there and you yank out the heart and the lungs and the pancreas and the liver of these, and perhaps the brain, let's say that. And then you give it to these 5 people, and then they're all going to live. So wouldn't a utilitarian be good to kill this person in order to save 5 people? So utilitarianism gets these very grisly consequences if you don't have any kind of guardrails on utilitarianism. Utilitarianism has problems, right? So the relationship to Buddhism is actually kind of interesting because it's focused on the first noble truth, the fact that all human beings suffer. And I think that Mill and Bentham are both onto something there. The problem is a system does not teach you how do you live a good life. Okay, so utilitarianism wants to fight against suffering by increasing pleasure and reducing pain. Do you see a problem with this? Do you think that this is good? If we're trying to increase pleasure and reduce pain, what would stop us from just constant rotting and just constantly watching brain rot content on TikTok 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because that's maximum pleasure, isn't it? Up to you. So there are different solutions to the problem of suffering. You're fighting against the same disease, but with different medicine. Do you think that there's ever a time that killing can be morally right? It's just one more thing that you can write about in the comments. I can take this one further if you're interested in the discussion. I'm going to stop right here and pick up libertarianism. If you want some further reading, if you go into the library, there's a story called The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula Le Guin. It's in the library of the animalflower.net. I'll put that link in there. So in The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, there is a perfect society that is enjoying this, like whole perfect life, perfect situation. And it's almost boring to read because it's just talking about how happy everybody's life is. And they get down to the reason that this exists. And it's because there is one child who is kept locked away from any happiness in his life and not ever given any love or allowed out into the light, and no development of any sorts. If you look up the life of feral children who have been locked away, it's something like that. It's a really disturbing case. And they talk about how everybody knows this kid is there. And they know that if the kid was brought into the light, there would be an end to their civilization. It would be the end of the happiness that they enjoy. And so that's why the article is called The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, because some people are like, I can't be a part of this anymore. So they don't destroy it, they leave. And they're like, I'm not going to be a part of this anymore. It's a brilliant, short story. Read it. Do a final presentation about it. It's amazing. It's really short. And it opens up the problem with utilitarianism quite beautifully. And that's that if you have enough people benefiting, few people can really have their human rights trod on. And what I'm going to say later is I think that this is the case in Thailand. Young people keep trying to elect Democratic candidates, but these Democratic candidates want to get rid of this underclass situation where you have these taxi drivers who have to work a 10-hour day to try to make 500 baht in profit after their gas is paid for and everything like that. And, they are beating on their cars, so their cars are going to need to get upgraded at some point. 500 baht a day is not a lot, and that's a big pay increase from the 300 baht a day minimum wage. There's a lot of underage labor. People are working these 7-10-hour days. Everybody I talk to that's working in Thailand works every single day, and that is an underclass, and you can argue that that is necessary for the survival of the economy. I think that that's why people keep crushing these democracy candidates. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but it is a question of many people being subjugated for the happiness of the few. And when we are in Thailand, like we are that few, we get to enjoy our lives. And there are a lot of people who enjoy it quite a bit less. What do you think of this? If it's bothering you, that's the thing to write about. All right, let's move on to libertarianism. So, how do we stop building perfect societies on the back of an underclass? You have this idea of libertarianism, and this is the idea of freedom of the individual. Hey, I'm just going over this video and I'm realizing that libertarianism is not always going to solve the class war, just so you know, right? So libertarianism is sometimes a good excuse for not helping poor people. So I just realized when I'm watching this video that kind of the way it's presented makes it seem like libertarianism is going to save poor people and get the rich people to help. It's often kind of the opposite of that. So of course it's more complicated than that. So I just wanted to throw that in there to make a little bit more sense of it. Okay. Where everybody can stand to benefit if just one person is sacrificed, but you say, no, we don't sacrifice people. Everyone is a human who gets human rights, and we're not going to ever sacrifice one for the many. Do you like libertarianism? Let's find out. So I would say before you dig into this, I have added the link for the political compass test. It's seriously just a meme on Reddit. And we'll talk about this meme at length because it's one more way of seeing the political landscape. Last week we talked about right versus left. The right wing is the left wing is Usually the left wing is more socialist or communist, wanting to give more things to more people. And the right says, I don't really trust the government to do that on the one end. Also, the right is more conservative with respect to social issues, often. But this is too many things to put together. So the political compass will tell you where you are economically. How much in terms of economics do you think we should be redistributing from the rich to the poor? And also libertarianism versus authoritarianism. How strong do you think the government needs to be in order to create good outcomes? Do you believe that a strong government would be good? Do you believe that a strong government would be bad, right? Totally up to you, and you can find out by taking the political compass test. The link is in your assignment for the week. Okay, so The political compass is going to give us 4 quadrants. You have anarchism versus totalitarianism, and you have socialism versus capitalism. This is one way of looking at it, and this is flipped from the way the meme usually is. Anarchism basically means, let's say I believe that human beings are inherently good. Human nature is good. We talked about this last week. And so I think that if you have a very weak government, the natural inclinations of human beings are going to shine through a little bit more because society won't be oppressive and you'll have this freedom. Totalitarianism, on the other hand, comes from saying, no, I think humans are bad, we're corrupt, and society is a good thing that socializes us and makes us do good. We don't want to do good, but a totalitarian society makes us do good. I don't trust human beings, and that's why I want a strong government. That's a totalitarian position. Let's say capitalism. Capitalism says, hey, command economies don't work because the government just can't solve all of our problems because we don't have God AI yet. What we do have is a bunch of people who want to make money for themselves. And so we should give them a lot of freedom to deliver things on a market. And the more we let the market do, the better outcomes are going to be for the vast majority of us, because capitalism is very good at delivering stuff to people. Socialism says capitalism has problems. I'll just say that. Capitalism has problems, and we need to build in a little bit more statecraft that's going to force some equality. That's one way to put it. Let's say I'm a banker. I chop up companies and fire people, and I make a bunch of money, drive a bunch of Ferraris, and the government says, hey, we're going to be socialist. P-Win Motorcycles all over the place are starving so that you can drive your stupid Ferraris. I need you to sell a couple of your Ferraris, pay some taxes so that these P-Win Motorcycles can send their kids to schools that are decent. They can get affordable food and stuff. We're going to do stuff for the poor, and we're going to ask the rich to pay for the stuff that we do for the poor, right? Another way of looking at this is expanding human rights. We're going to talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. Those are the 3 major ones. Socialists will sometimes expand these to say, you also have the right to health care, or you also have the right to education, and then a whole host of other things. Do you believe in this? Take the test and find out. So this is what it looks like in the memes. I'll start here because this is like most of the governments of the world. Authoritarian right says we want to have a strong government and we want to have capitalism doing a lot of the work. Most of the governments of the world look like this. Authoritarian left would be communism, where you have not a lot of trust in capitalism to get people what they need, but in order to stop these markets from going, they end up quite authoritarian because they have to clamp down on personal freedom. And this is how the capitalists kind of sell the relationship between personal freedom and market economies. Do you think that that's a real relationship? Up to you. Now let's go down here to the fun ones. Libertarian right situation would be where you think that capitalism should be completely left alone to deliver value to human beings as it does. Everybody is free to rise as long as they work as hard as they can, and everybody is also free to fail. No government bailouts for anybody. If these things are going to happen, we're going to let the market decide things. So it's almost like a worship of the market. And the jokes that you find over here is that a libertarian right-leaning person would not want any kind of authoritarianism. They would want maximum freedom, and they would want the market delivering things, which would mean if you want to sell drugs, even harmful drugs, in order to make money, and there's a market for those drugs, there should be nothing stopping them, right? If you want to sell sexual services, if you want to sell your kidney, and the place that you stop is if you want to sell slaves, because libertarians believe in the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of property usually, but liberty means no slaves. So you do not sell people. But me being free to sell my kidney is maybe something that the libertarian right would do. Now, the libertarian left is where I always end up when I take these tests, and it's because I don't trust capitalism to do good, and I don't trust governments to do good, and I hope that human nature is okay. Unfortunately, there are zero governments that have ever existed that are libertarian left, and this is because they do not trust capitalism and they do not trust government and hope that human nature is just going to take over. The book The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin, who's the author of The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, is the best example of like a libertarian left situation. There's an anarchist commune on the moon. Very interesting book. You guys that are a little bit nerdier and more into this, please put it on your list. It's a fantastic book. In my ethics class, I used to give sections of it. It's not a utopia. It's also not a dystopia. It's a situation where they tried to build a perfect world, and they got pretty close to a perfect world. But, of course, the musicians still have problems even in the perfect world. All right, so find out where you are on this spectrum. The greatest thing about that is it really gives you something to write about for the week. If you're like, I don't know what to write about, what's your position on the political compass, and write about it. It's like kind of a free thing to write about if you can't think of something. All right. So we talked before about the question of what is right? Is it the law? Can you think of something that's legal but not moral? Is it what our parents tell us? Confucianism would say yes. If you have a religion, a lot of your ethics are already built in. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. So the question of what is the right thing to do is often answered by systems such as utilitarianism, virtue ethics, religions, and now libertarianism. Now, again, we have these political questions, the right, the left, right wing, left wing. We talked about that a little bit last week. And here we have these political spectra, right? Somebody who's a moderate would be between the Republicans and the Democrats. And this is the Americans, of course. Thai politics cannot begin to be understood in this way. And here on this, you have the socialists, and then you have the fascists/communists. Putting the Nazis in on the left is something that people will usually get upset about, and they want to put the Nazis on the right. Here, having the anarchists on the right is something that would also make people angry. The accuracy that I'll show you here is that the libertarians believe in a very, very limited government, right? The government should not be involved in anything unless it's protecting the right to life. Don't let people get murdered. The right to liberty. Don't let anybody become a slave. And the right to property. So there should be a limited police force that stops property crimes, slavery, and murder. And, you know, like other crimes against a person's freedom. And that's it, right? If I don't want to wear a seatbelt, don't stop me. If I want to use harmful chemicals that you don't think are a good idea, my body, my choice, right? This is a pure libertarian position. I'm already going to give it away. You don't find very many pure libertarians. It's sometimes criticized as a book club. All right, let's keep going. So here's another version of it. You have slavery, and freedom somewhere in the middle. Do you believe that? Oh, also, just going back, the next step from the libertarianism would be anarchism, because that would mean you don't even have the limited government. You have no government. So often political people will bring us to this kind of a question where you say, who wants free stuff? Everybody raises their hand. Who wants to pay for other people's free stuff? Nobody raises their hand. And this is the question of democracy, right? And this is a criticism of socialism. They say, in a socialist situation, you don't incentivize work because becoming a super producer is not well incentivized because people have to pay so much in taxes. What do you think? Do you think that this is true or not? Wouldn't these people want to do it for another reason? Would they want to be famous? Would they want to be well loved by people because everybody knows that these people are, paying the bill for everybody else? Would Elon Musk be more of a hero if he was like paying a lot of taxes? What about Thai billionaires? If the Thai billionaires were producing value for all of society, would they be more seen as heroes and less as people that are kind of like stealing from the Thai people because they enjoy the benefits of the cheap labor, don't really pay taxes for all these people? What do you think? You know my position here. Tell me how I'm wrong. Okay, so let's talk about human rights. What are they? What are the human rights? Now, you can look this up, and you would find after World War II, they had a Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and this contained a lot of different rights, marriage equality just passed in Thailand. There are a lot of different rights, right? It's not just life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Where do rights come from? Kennedy famously said that they don't come from the generosity of the government. They come from the hand of God. So these are something that are supposed to be natural. The writer Yuval Noah Harari talks about how human rights are a fiction. He says that we can imagine these magical things called human rights and believe them. But if you look at his TED Talk, he says, you take a human being, you cut him open, you will find lungs, you will find the heart, but you will not find any human rights inside of the person, right? And he is correct about this. Human rights are a fiction. They're not real. They're something that I believe in. I believe that humans have human rights, not just rich humans, not just humans who look like me, not just humans who love the same way that I do or something, right? All humans. That's something that I believe in. Is it real? No, it's not real. Human rights are not real. They're just not, right? But I still believe in them. Okay. So what are these rights? The Magna Carta, you go back to 1215 and you had John of England saying, hey, you can't just set your peasants on fire anymore. You have to actually treat them like human beings. Well, what does it mean to treat them like human beings? Well, let's write out a few things. You're not able to do this anymore. You can't do this anymore because the lords were able to do all kinds of things to the peasants. They just owned the peasants. And the Magna Carta in England was the first time that they said, yeah, they're still people, so you don't own them. Yeah. And the Magna Carta was violated 5 million times in the first year that it showed up, but they finally wrote this thing down and said, we're going to start giving human beings rights. And like I said, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was in 1948. And it's an attempt to say, we all on this planet are going to agree to certain rules, and they're going to flow from rights. We talk about war crimes, right? Why are landmines war crimes? Well, I mean, they engage non-combatants. You can have kids that are walking around and they step on a landmine 20 years later because your military didn't remember to go clean up that landmine, and you're engaging a non-combatant. Why is it a war crime to fire on civilian targets? It flows from this kind of thing. So you can look these up. I'll link it. And I'm going to remind myself to link it. Check out these human rights, and you can zoom in on this and decide, what do you think these are? Anybody who's dealt with the healthcare situation understands that infinite healthcare is probably not possible for everybody, because at some point you run out of the ability to stop somebody from dying. We're all going to die. Sad. But how much healthcare should be given to everybody? So what are rights? We have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what we always hear, right? And that was a nice Will Smith movie. But normally it's the pursuit of property that we have in the Declaration of Independence, in the writings of John Locke, life, liberty, and the pursuit of property, right? So Locke was the most important thinker about property. We won't talk about him too much, but we need him to think about intellectual property. You guys are musicians, you're going to think about intellectual property. So he was a political philosopher during the colonial times, and this is when the age of discovery, when Europe was kind of discovering a bunch of places that already had people. Yeah, so this tiny little place ran around and conquered the entire world, basically, during this time. And part of Locke's project was to try to maintain a sense of human rights while his homeboys in Western Europe were taking over the entire world. And that's a tension that we see in his work. You could almost argue that Western civilization would have been worse without him, but what he laid out is not necessarily perfect. So this was, of course, the age of discovery, like I said, in scare quotes, because they were discovering places that didn't have people yet. And he's one of the first social contract thinkers. And the social contract is an interesting idea, because what do you know about the social contract? Any kind of contract. You get a contract with a record company, you have to sign it, right? You have to sign. And this is the idea of consent. So Locke and other social contract thinkers believe that we have consented somehow to the social contract. How is that? Well, you wake up into this world, there are all these rules, society is here, and you have to follow all of these rules of society. Why? You never consented to it. You didn't click on the terms and conditions. The argument is, throughout most of our lives, we've been driving on the roads, we've been enjoying the peace that has been fought out by all of these relationships between all these governments. We can order stuff online and it just shows up at our house. Yeah, a lot of society does feel oppressive, but at the same time, the conveniences are things that we've already been enjoying. So these social contract thinkers say, hey, you're already in because you've already been enjoying the benefits of it. So rebelling and going into the wild is not really okay. You're supposed to just be a part of society. But for Locke to still believe in freedom, we would still need to choose the social contract. So you do kind of get this sense that, hey, you can leave society if you want to. You can go out into the woods and try to go live with the tigers. And in Thailand, there's a lot more of an ability to leave society because you can go become a wandering itinerant. You go get a bowl and get a jiwan and you walk around. And you wake up every morning and you walk and you beg for your food and you don't have to be at a temple. Thailand will feed you. So you can kind of be outside of society if you wanted to. All right. So back to this question that we've been wrestling with for 2 weeks, and this question of whether humanity is good. What would the state of nature be like if there was no more rule of law? If society wasn't there to stop us from being animals, what would we be like? Well, Locke, as a social contract thinker, thinks that it would be chaos. He thinks no laws and no government would be complete chaos, right? Anarchy. If you're an anarchist, you might think that no laws and no government would be amazing. But the state of nature would basically be a war of all against all. You go into the office and it would be like this. You go into the bathroom and it would look like this. Wherever law ends, tyranny begins. And tyranny means that you are ruled by something that you didn't choose, and you are ruled by, a violent thing that hates you. Right? Tyrannosaurus Rex. So he advocates for a libertarian law, which does what? It defends rights, and only defends rights. And these are the life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. Not happiness, but property, right? But doesn't this seem a little bit out of place? You've got life, liberty, and the pursuit of stuff. These make a lot of sense. You can't kill other people. This feels very natural. You can't enslave somebody, which would also be a way of taking their life away from them. But you must respect the stuff that I have within the system of getting stuff that we have come up with. That's a little bit less obvious, right? Just being able to tell other people that they can't have your cookies isn't really a good enough third inalienable right, in my own point of view. Up to you. What do you think? So with Locke, it all begins from one question. The question of, do you own yourself? If you're a utilitarian, you would say, what? I'll wait. No, you do not own yourself. And the reason is you are just here at the service of all of us together, because we are in the process of delivering the decision that makes most of us happy. And this is almost like democracy, remember? Where we all voted, you were in the minority. Sorry. Hopefully next time you're in the majority, but you got to suffer a little bit because there's fewer amount of you. So, sorry. This is called the tyranny of the majority. Libertarianism would say what? Do you own yourself? Answer should be easy. Yes. If you're a libertarian, you do own yourself. If there are 500 people who want one thing against one person who doesn't want it, and they say, hey, if you just sacrifice your happiness, 500 of us can be happy. And the libertarian says, I don't care. I won't do that. I can be asked to do that, and I might do it out of the kindness of my heart, but I cannot be morally obligated to sacrifice myself for anyone at any time. I will always be choosing, and I'll be choosing when I give, I'll be choosing when I sacrifice. Obviously, they're against taxes. They're against being asked to give up money for people who are less fortunate than them. This is a fundamental argument that the libertarians engage in. Okay, so property. Every man has a property in his own person. This nobody has a right to but himself. That's Locke. So Locke says, yes, we do own ourselves, and this is very important, we own what? Our labor. We own our labor. And when we mix our labor with the land, then we can own the land. By mixing our work with the land, we own property. And this was the beginning of the United States of America. The settlers came over here, they colonized the coast, and they started to push into the west of the country, and they were finding these North American Native Americans. And they were, as far as civilizations go, they were pretty cool. They lived in harmony with the land. They hunted these big old buffalo, and when they would hunt them, they wouldn't leave any garbage behind. They would use every bit of the animal. They also didn't do agriculture, and they didn't really believe in land ownership. And so when these Europeans showed up and they were like, we own this land, the natives were like, all right, cool. You own the land. That's hilarious. Okay, sure. Yeah, you own the land, whatever. All right, we'll come back later. And they come back later and see, oh man, these Falang built a city here. I guess they were really serious about owning the land because they had just a completely different relationship with it. They were kind of always camping, and they were always leaving no trace and not really burning the place down. They were living in harmony with nature. But that didn't go very well for them when they contacted a more technologically advanced civilization. Okay, enough of that. How does this work for musicians? When we own our work/labor and we mix our labor with the land, then we own the land, and then we can own property. So how does this make sense for intellectual property? Through our labor, we can own property. Think about this. What is your labor? And what are the natural resources of music? Can I own the key of A minor? No, that's like a river or an ocean or something. People don't typically own rivers, and they don't own oceans, right? These are natural resources that are kind of free to everybody. And if I use A minor, that's fine. But if I make a melody, I have mixed my labor with the natural resources of music. And so I own that music because I have taken something like a style or a rhythm or a key or some of these things that belong to everybody, and I've turned it into something that belongs to me through my work. Even splice. If you use a splice beat and you alter it enough, it becomes yours. You've taken this thing that's this new version of a natural resource and you've turned it into your own thing. Now, if somebody else copyrights it first by posting it on YouTube, then you don't own it. But you can see that the idea of Falang property, intellectual property, comes from this. And I say Falang property because this is something that we see in like the record era, the CD era, the record era, the tape era, the CD era. You see this notion of intellectual property also with the music score, right? You have a document and you say, this is my music because look at the score, right? You have a way of writing it down. But the song Black is the Color of My True Love's Hair, we don't actually know who wrote that. Nina Simone probably made it the most famous, but it wasn't her song. It's an old song from back in the day. You take a song like Amazing Grace. We don't know who wrote Amazing Grace. It was like I think it was a slave song. So there was a song they were all singing while they were enslaved doing this work. And we don't know where that came from. There's a song in Thai called Salamao. It's like dum 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 dum, and I can't remember the melody. I can't remember the melody right now, but it's a song that I don't think we know who wrote it, right? So before this, we didn't really have this sense of intellectual property. A song wasn't owned. And if you look at something through like a communist lens, all music should belong to all people. And think about the way that we think about music. You have like Labanun stealing a song, or Ed Sheeran getting accused of stealing a song. Did he really steal the song? And like, can you steal a song? Can you steal a style? These are all interesting questions. And we're probably going to go into these in the next lesson because they're just so interesting for you. What do you think? What are the natural resources of music? What about A minor, C major, F major, G major? Should you be able to copyright that? I think no. You know, those are 4 chords, sound good on the guitar. Those belong to everybody. But once I put my words to it, there are just so many words in language that maybe it looks a little bit more like stealing. This would be a good final presentation. The line between stealing, borrowing, quoting. Do you find this interesting? Do a final presentation about it. Okay. Now we're just going to go to systems. So you can see that trying to order an entire society and saying, how should we get everybody to live their life, is a good time to start thinking about systems in terms of ethics. My favorite way of ordering my own life in terms of ethics is probably virtue that we talked about last week. And that's where you try to cultivate courage, love of wisdom, accumulation of knowledge, generosity, creativity. These are things that you try to make happen in your life. And you notice that they're not all about the question of like, be ethical by doing what you don't want to do to make other people happy. Doesn't that sound like a version of ethics? Do what you don't want to do to make other people happy. Ooh, that's ethical. Maybe it's not. Maybe you should be able to make yourself happy and have your life be full of meaning. And maybe that's a question of ethics too. And when you look at virtue, yeah, it is. But if you have courage and you have integrity, and then you get this chance to do something wrong, you won't do something wrong because you have courage and you have integrity, and they'll stop you from doing something wrong. This gets back to Socrates' question. Is virtue good for the soul? Yes, because it means when you do the thing that's good, you feel like this is me doing the thing that's good. You're engaging in authenticity. You are being a good person, and while you're being a good person, you're being your actual self because you've cultivated virtues. You've built them inside of yourself. Does that make sense to you? Great. I like the change between Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, where we have sort of a pitch towards let's have people do higher pleasures, right? Let's run a society like this. Let's give grants for jazz and for classical music because they're good things that need to be produced, because we're creating the greatest music that humans have ever seen. We need to keep it alive because it doesn't do that well in capitalism. We don't need grants for who can sing the best Taylor Swift song. Capitalism already has that represented very well. So systems, though, we need them when we're thinking about things through more of a government lens. How do you look at making everybody okay? And these are often the questions of the major world religions. They all have systems of ethics. One of them would be the 10 Commandments in Christianity. In the very beginning, you're asked to not worship other gods. This is similar in Islam. You also have commandments against killing, against stealing, against lying. You look at the Hakka in Buddhism. You're asked not to kill, not to steal, not to lie, not to do sexual misconduct, whatever that is, and not to intoxicate yourself. Now, is that the most important part of Buddhism? Or is this the idea that this is a major world religion and it sometimes has to run things? And when it has to run things, it needs to tell people, don't do these 5 things because I need to run a society now, right? There's always the question of which religion is giving us what kind of ethics. And this is where I want to turn us to, not because I feel like this is perfect thinking on my part. It's kind of the opposite. I have kind of an unfinished idea that I want to throw at you because if you haven't written something yet, you'll write something about this. Now, religion in general, we can of course talk about a lot of different ones. I am going to restrict us to what are sometimes called the world religions, and Sikhism, Zoroastrianism, animism. These are huge, well-represented religions. Let's say Shintoism in Japan. I'm going to leave those out just for time, and I'm going to focus on kind of a big 7. Forgive me, please. So first, let's do Asia. Now, we have Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. Hinduism, of course, is maybe the oldest of these, and this is ancient India. You have many gods. You have already an emphasis on meditation. You have a goal of enlightenment by getting rid of ignorance. And these are all wonderful things. The problem that I have with it ethically is the caste system. The caste system said that the Brahmin, the priests, the academics, were at the very top of the tower. They were the ones who had exclusive access to the spiritual texts, and they taught everybody else how to live a spiritual life. They were the highest. Next would be the Kshatriya. Those were the warriors and kings. Of course, these people are proved to be spiritually good because the wars that they wage back in the day are necessary in order to keep a society. Back in the day, we didn't have globalization, so there were always enemies at the gates waiting to come in. Of course, this is a belief in human nature that says human nature is not good, and there are always bad guys waiting to rush in. But the warriors and the kings would keep that okay under the guidance of the priests and the academics. The Vyasha were the business people. They were not to be on top. And they were also considered twice born. And then you had the commoners, the peasants, and the servants. Below all of them were the untouchables. And if you read this stuff, it's not just that the untouchables are not supposed to get the good stuff, they're supposed to get the bad stuff. It's almost a good thing to be treating them poorly. A lot of times, the caste system is seen as a human body, with the Brahmin as the head, the Kshatriya as the arms, the Vyasha as the legs, the Sudra as the feet. Already kind of an insult to the Sudra, right? But the untouchables are not even on the body. They are below the feet. So this is the Hindu caste system. Westerners love Hinduism when they listen to the Beatles, and the Beatles are talking about, ending duality and trying to get enlightenment and stuff. They're like, yeah, the Beatles, enlightenment, Hinduism, this is great. But when Westerners see the caste system, we're all disgusted by this because it is not universal human rights. It is antithetical to universal human rights. If I am following this system, I need to know who your parents are before I know if I'm going to treat you with the full suite of human rights. My ethical situation is not turned on until I know what caste you're in. And once I know your caste, then I know how to treat you. Then I know if I have moral obligations to you or not. I, as a Westerner who believes in human rights, have a problem with this kind of thing. Now let's move on to the other religions. So, Buddhism came next and tried to throw the caste system in the garbage. The Buddha was invited to teach everything in Sanskrit. He chose instead to teach it in Pali. Why? Because it was the people's language, and he wanted Buddhism to be available to all people. So he threw this idea of the caste system in the garbage and said, no, enlightenment is now available to all people. All you have to be is human. Buddhism, as I see, looks like it is good for universal human rights. Argue with me if you don't like that. Taoism is complicated. Taoism is kind of a worship of the energy in nature and trying to use esoteric knowledge to figure out how to wield it in interesting ways. I find it so interesting. During the Communist Revolution, Taoism got just kind of like burnt out of China. It's very sad because it's a very cool religion. Every time I see like Avatar: The Last Airbender, this is all like tipping the hat to Taoism very much. It's a very interesting religion, and I would probably argue that Taoism is not hostile to human rights at all. It's probably good for human rights, but it's never really ruling. we never have a situation where we have a Taoist country or a Taoist society. Confucianism is all about hierarchies. Confucianism says, if you're a citizen, listen to the government. If you're young, listen to the old people. If you're a female, you should listen to the males. If you are, lower, listen to the one above you. So this idea of constant deference to somebody who's higher than you on this ladder of society, I don't think that works as well with human rights. You don't really get equality out of Confucianism. Now, Confucius would probably say, that's not the point. I don't want equality. I want there to not be a war. So I want a rigid hierarchy where everybody knows where they are, and the rigid, brittle nature of society is going to keep it from breaking. And when it starts to break a little bit, we're going to rush to fix it. And this is a very conservative idea. So in my view of the four religions, major religions of Asia, I think that Buddhism does the best job of giving us universal human rights, because the full ethical system is turned on as soon as you see a human. In Hinduism, I have to know who your parents are to know if I'm going to treat you like a human being or if I'm going to treat you like an untouchable. So Confucianism, similarly, I need to know what our relationship is, and I might be over you or below you, and this does not guarantee a universal human rights. We don't have equality in this. In Buddhism, I think you have more. Do you agree with me? Do you not agree with me? You don't have to agree with me. Fight me, please, right? I'm only saying this so that you will fight me or, give me whatever your ideas are. Now, going back to this is really similar. This is the caste system of Hinduism. It's really similar to the Republic. You had the philosopher kings on top. That's like the Brahmin. You had the soldiers next. That's like the Kshatriya. And then you had the business people next. And here we have the workers, right? And the idea was to lead with wisdom and to execute with, military power, and then have the appetites obey. And of course, we have this idea that it wasn't supposed to be a state. It's supposed to be your life. You're supposed to lead with your own wisdom. You're supposed to execute with your will. And you're supposed to make your appetites obey these other two higher principles. But my question is, do we have the caste system in Thailand? This is a huge question that we have here. Thailand is supposed to be a Buddhist country, but do we have a caste system in Thailand? I mentioned it earlier. I said if I was going to have a meaningful friendship with P. Win Motorsai, our friendship would be challenged by the fact that I have more money and I have more education than P. Win Motorsai. I just do. And also, at certain points in my life, I could solve many of this guy's problems by just sneaking 30,000 baht into his bag one time. And if I don't do that, how much of a friend am I really? So being friends across racial lines, that's no problem. Being friends with people who have a different sexual orientation, different gender, come from a different place, speak a different language, that's not very hard. But being friends with somebody from a different class, it's a little bit harder. Am I wrong? Fight me, please. I think that Thailand is a Buddhist country, but I see the caste system strongly at work in Thai society and culture. And part of the reason that I see this is that you have billionaires that can do whatever they want, and you have a true underclass. And it's almost as if the economy and the society wouldn't necessarily function if it wasn't that way. And I think that's why the Orange Party keeps getting kicked out. Is this interesting to you? Do your political philosophy. Is it not interesting to you? Skip it. Do you think that I'm wrong? Fight me. All of these things are welcome. All right. So Buddhism, I think, is the most universal of the world religions. But as I'm telling you right now, I don't think that Thailand is actually a 100% Buddhist country. It says that it is. But you have a lot of Hinduism here. You have a lot of Taoism with people paying to have a fortune teller tell you where you can put your bathroom, right? You don't want an architect telling you. You don't want an engineer telling you. You need this feng shui guy. Feng shui, I can't say it. Also very Confucianist, not as Confucianist as China, but very Confucianist. It's not just Buddhism. It's all of these systems running the country together. Okay, so what about the West? In the West, we have what are called the Abrahamic religions, and this is because of Abraham. Abraham had this first son, Isaac. Isaac was very important for Judaism. His second son was very important for Islam. Judaism turned into Christianity later, produced Christianity later. This world produced Islam later. So these are all called the Abrahamic religions because they all go back to this one character, Abraham. Now, in Judaism, this is a very small religion, but it's the roots of these other two, so it always gets talked about as another one of the world religions. So even though it's a very low in population, very high impact in the world. So Judaism, I would argue, is not universalizing. And the reason is, if I am in this and you are not in this, there are certain things that I can do with you that I can't do to somebody else who is in. You know what I mean? So if I'm the member of the in-group, my ethical principles with in-group members are more strong than they are with people outside. Christianity, not perfect, right? And it's been kind of the powerhouse religion. It's been huge in the past 1,000 years. And when you're ruling, it's very easy to criticize you. I spend most of my time criticizing the United States and China because they are number one and number two in power. I criticize Thailand because we live there, right? So Christianity is very easy to criticize. However, if you look at Christian ethics, all I need to know about another person in order to be ethically beholden to them is that that other person is a human. I don't need to know that that person is a Christian. I just need to know that the other person is a human if I'm a Christian. And I think that that is more in line with universal human rights. Do you disagree? Argue with me, please. Islam, similarly, if I'm a Muslim, and I'm dealing with another Muslim, I have moral obligations to that Muslim. If I'm a Muslim and I'm dealing with a non-Muslim, I have different moral obligations. So I'm telling you, and you can tell me what you think, that Christianity and Buddhism are the two most universally compatible with human rights. And I'm mainly just saying this so that you will write something to argue with me. So, next week, we're going to have a discussion. Please bring questions, comments, whatever it is that you like. We'll talk about what you want to talk about. I love these. They are a good time for me to get to know where you are coming from. Keep your final presentations in mind, and I will see you next week. Peace.